I'm Margaret Sullivan, 72 years old, and until 3 months ago, my own family had convinced everyone, including my doctors, that I was losing my mind to dementia. While they whispered about my confusion and memory lapses at family dinners, they were systematically draining my $2 million life savings through forged power of attorney documents. My daughter Jennifer, the one I trusted most, had been the mastermind all along. She told neighbors I couldn't manage my finances anymore, told my bank I needed help with transactions, and told my lawyer I was too confused to handle my own affairs. But here's what they didn't know. I was recording everything, every conversation, every lie, every theft. The joke's on them, because I've been 3 steps ahead this entire time. And now they're about to learn that this confused old woman just orchestrated the perfect revenge. Like and subscribe if you've ever faced family betrayal. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and for 72 years, I believed I understood what family meant. I built my life on that foundation: trust, loyalty, unconditional love. How naive I was. I wasn't born into wealth. My late husband Robert and I started with nothing but determination and a small savings account. When we married in 1972, we bought our first duplex in downtown Portland for $12,000, living in one side while renting out the other. Robert worked construction during the day, while I managed the property and kept our books at night. We saved every penny, reinvested every dollar of rental income, and slowly built our real estate empire. By the time Robert passed away 10 years ago, we owned 17 properties across 3 states. The life insurance, combined with our real estate portfolio and business investments, left me with just over $2 million. Not bad for a girl who grew up in a trailer park in rural Oregon. Jennifer was always my pride and joy, my firstborn, born when I was 25, and still naive enough to believe that love alone could shape a person's character. She was brilliant valedictorian of her high school class, full scholarship to Portland State University. I remember the day she graduated college. How proud Robert and I felt watching her walk across that stage. We thought we'd raised the perfect daughter. "Mom, you and Dad gave me everything," she said that day, tears in her eyes as she hugged us both. "I'll never forget what you sacrificed for me." I believed her then. I believed her when she moved back home after her first divorce to get back on her feet. I believed her when she needed help with her mortgage after her second marriage failed. I believed her when she said she wanted to be close to me after Robert died, moving into the guest house on my property to keep me company. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. Jennifer was always there when I had money to give, always absent when I needed emotional support. But grief has a way of clouding judgment, and I was so lonely after Robert's death that I welcomed her presence, her concern, her constant attention. The first incident happened 6 months ago. I was making Sunday dinner, Robert's favorite pot roast recipe, when Jennifer arrived with her latest boyfriend, Marcus, a 20-something personal trainer who looked at my house like he was appraising it for auction. "Mom, you put salt in the green beans twice," Jennifer said, tasting them at the stove. Her voice carried that tone I'd heard her use with her ex-husband's patient, but condescending, like she was talking to a child. I looked at the salt shaker in my hand, confused. Had I salted them already? The beans tasted fine to me, but Jennifer was making such a fuss, dumping them down the garbage disposal and starting over. Marcus watched the whole scene with interest, like he was taking mental notes. "It's okay, Mom," Jennifer said, rubbing my shoulder in that way that made me feel diminished. "These things happen as we get older. Maybe we should start writing things down." That was the first crack in the foundation of my trust. Such a small thing over salted green beans, but it planted a seed of doubt that Jennifer would water carefully over the coming months. Did I salt them twice? Was my memory starting to slip at 71? These were reasonable concerns, weren't they? The second incident happened 3 weeks later. I couldn't find my checkbook, the one I'd kept in the same kitchen drawer for 15 years. I searched everywhere: my desk, my purse, even the refrigerator. Because I'd heard that's where people with dementia sometimes put things. Mom, you gave it to me yesterday, remember? Jennifer said when I called her. Panicked. You asked me to help you pay bills because you were feeling overwhelmed, but I didn't remember asking for help. I'd been managing my own finances since I was 18 years old. Why would I suddenly need assistance now? Jennifer arrived 30 minutes later with my checkbook, her expression a perfect blend of concern and patience. You seemed so confused yesterday, she explained. You couldn't remember which bills were due when. I thought it would be easier if I helped organize everything. She showed me a neat stack of bills she claimed I'd given her, each one paper clipped to its due date reminder. It looked like my handwriting, but something felt wrong. The organization was too perfect, too systematic for how I actually managed my finances. I preferred my controlled chaos bills in a showbox, payment dates memorized, everything handled on my own timeline. But the checkbook was back in my hands, and Jennifer seemed so helpful, so caring. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I did ask for help and forgot. The possibility terrified me more than I cared to admit. The third incident sealed my growing self-doubt. I found myself at the grocery store with no memory of driving there. One moment I was reading on my back porch. The next I was standing in the produce section of Safeway, holding a shopping list I didn't remember writing. The list was in my handwriting, I was sure of that, but I had no recollection of creating it. Bananas, milk, bread, cat food, basic items, nothing unusual, except I didn't have a cat. I'd been allergic my entire life. Why would I write down cat food? I drove home in a panic, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Was this how it started? These gaps in memory, these moments of confusion? I'd watched my own mother fade away with Alzheimer's 20 years ago. The thought of following that same path filled me with dread. Jennifer found me crying at my kitchen table when she stopped by that evening. Mom, what's wrong? She asked, genuine concern in her voice as she pulled a chair close to mine. I told her about the grocery store, about the list, about my growing fear that I was losing myself piece by piece. She held my hand while I cried, her touch warm and reassuring. We should probably talk to Dr. Peterson, she said gently, just to be safe. There could be a dozen explanations: stress, grief, medication interactions, but we need to know for sure. That night, I called my doctor's office and scheduled an appointment. Jennifer insisted on driving me, on sitting in during the consultation, on taking notes while Dr. Peterson asked his questions. She was the perfect concerned daughter, and I was grateful for her support. I should have realized then that perfect daughters don't need to steal from their mothers. Perfect daughters don't need to manufacture mental illness to justify their theft. But I was too frightened, too confused, too dependent on her reassurance to see the trap being set around me. The foundation of my life, my independence, my sharp mind, my trust in family was cracking. And Jennifer was there with a sledgehammer, ready to bring it all down. Dr. Peterson had been my physician for over 20 years. He'd delivered both my children, treated Robert through his final illness, and guided me through the grief that followed. I trusted him completely, which made his words all the more devastating. Margaret, I'm seeing some concerning patterns in your recent behavior, he said, reviewing the notes Jennifer had provided. She sat beside me, her hand on my arm, radiating the kind of devoted concern that should have comforted me, but somehow felt rehearsed. Jennifer had been busy before our appointment. She documented every incident: the salted green beans, the missing checkbook, the grocery store confusion. She'd even included things I didn't remember, supposedly getting lost driving to the bank, calling her at 3 a.m. asking about people who weren't there, forgetting our neighbor's name after knowing him for 15 years. I don't remember those things, I protested weakly. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. If I was having memory problems, wouldn't forgetting the memory problems be part of the condition? That's often how it starts, Mom, Jennifer said softly, squeezing my hand The scary part is that you don't realize it's happening. Dr. Peterson nodded gravely. We'll need to run some tests, blood work, cognitive assessments, possibly a brain scan. Early intervention is key if we're dealing with dementia. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Dementia, the slow erasure of everything that made me who I was. I'd watched it happen to my mother, seen her brilliant mind reduced to confusion and fear. Was that my future? Over the next few weeks, Jennifer became my shadow. She drove me to appointments, sat in on every consultation, took detailed notes about my episodes. She was so helpful, so organized, so perfectly concerned that even I began to rely on her version of events. Remember, Mom, you asked me to handle the grocery shopping, she'd say when I wondered why my refrigerator was suddenly full of foods I never bought. You said crowds make you anxious now. You gave me your ATM card yesterday, she'd explain. When I couldn't find it, you said it was easier if I handled the banking for a while. Each explanation came with that same patient smile, the same gentle tone one might use with a confused child, and increasingly, I felt like a confused child, dependent on Jennifer to make sense of a world that seemed to be shifting around me. The test results were the final nail in the coffin of my confidence. Dr. Peterson called us in to discuss the findings, his expression appropriately somber. I'm afraid the cognitive tests show significant decline, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Combined with the behavioral changes Jennifer has documented, I believe we're looking at early-stage dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. I stared at the test results, not understanding the numbers and charts, but recognizing the implications. My worst fears were being confirmed by medical science. Jennifer's hand found mine, her grip tight with what I assumed was shared grief. What does this mean for Mom's independence? Jennifer asked, her voice carefully modulated. Her ability to make financial decisions, live alone, drive. Dr. Peterson's answer was exactly what she wanted to hear. We'll need to consider gradually transferring responsibilities to family members. Someone should probably take over her finances sooner rather than later. Dementia patients often become vulnerable to scams and poor judgment. That evening, Jennifer helped me organize my important papers. She was so efficient, so caring, creating neat files for everything: bank statements, insurance policies, property, deeds, investment accounts. She suggested we visit an attorney to establish a power of attorney just in case. I don't want to take over your life, Mom, she assured me as we sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by the documentation of my life's work. But if something happens, if you have an episode or get confused about important decisions, someone needs to be able to step in and protect you. It made sense. It was responsible planning. It was what any loving daughter would suggest for her aging mother. So why did I feel like I was signing my own death warrant when I put my signature on those documents? The attorney, recommended by Jennifer, was a young man named Bradley Mills. He seemed competent enough, asking the right questions about my mental state, my wishes for my estate, my concerns about the future. Jennifer sat beside me during the consultation, occasionally clarifying details when I hesitated or seemed confused. Your daughter is very thorough, Mr. Mills observed, reviewing the medical documentation Jennifer had brought. It's clear she has your best interests at heart. The power of attorney documents gave Jennifer authority over my finances if I became incapacitated. The definition was broad enough to be triggered by something as simple as a doctor's note confirming cognitive decline, which, thanks to Dr. Peterson's assessment, was already on file. This is just insurance, Mom, Jennifer said as we left the attorney's office. I hope we never need to use it. But even as she said it, I noticed how quickly she'd memorized the account numbers from my bank statements, how carefully she'd photographed the documents with her phone for safekeeping, how comfortable she seemed with the idea of controlling my financial life. That night, I lay in bed wondering if I was being paranoid or if some deep, primitive part of my brain was trying to warn me about something my conscious mind couldn't. Except the daughter I'd raised, loved, and trusted was positioning herself to take control of everything I'd worked for. But why would she need to do that unless she genuinely believed I was losing my mind? The evidence certainly supported that conclusion. The medical tests, the documented incidents, my own growing confusion about simple things. Maybe Jennifer was just being practical. Maybe she was protecting me from myself. Or maybe I was about to discover that the person I trusted most in the world had been systematically destroying my life to steal my fortune. The sad truth is that when someone you love tells you that you're losing your mind, you start to believe them, especially when they provide medical evidence, documentation, and witnesses to support their claims, especially when they're so loving, so patient, so perfectly concerned about your well-being. I was about to learn that perfect performances often hide the most devastating betrayals, and that sometimes the people who claim to be protecting you are the very ones you need protection from. The annual Sullivan family barbecue had been a tradition for over 30 years. Every 4th of July, our entire extended family would gather at my house for food, fireworks, and the kind of chaos that only comes from having for generations in one backyard. This year, the gathering would reveal the true nature of the people I'd called family my entire life. I should have noticed how differently everyone treated me. The conversations that stopped when I approached, the way my son David avoided eye contact, the patronizing tone my sister-in-law Carol used when she asked how I was feeling. But I was still caught in the web of my supposed cognitive decline, still doubting my own perceptions. Jennifer had been preparing for weeks, coordinating with family members, planning the menu, organizing activities. She'd insisted on handling all the arrangements herself, claiming I was too stressed to manage the logistics. At the time, I was grateful for her help. Looking back, I realized she was orchestrating the performance of a lifetime. Mom seems to be holding up well. I overheard my nephew Jake telling his wife, as they set up lawn chairs near the pool, though Jennifer says she's having more bad days than good ones lately. Bad days? What bad days? I felt fine. Confused sometimes, yes, but not incapacitated, not on the decline. They were all discussing like I wasn't there. David arrived with his teenage kids, my beloved grandchildren Emma and Tyler. They hugged me dutifully, but seemed uncomfortable, like they'd been coached on how to interact with their suddenly fragile grandmother, Emma, who used to call me every week to chat about school and boys, barely spoke to me. Tyler, my fishing buddy and fellow history buff, acted like he was visiting a stranger. Grandma, are you okay? Emma asked when I questioned her about her college plans. You asked me the same thing 10 minutes ago. Had I? I didn't remember repeating myself, but everyone was looking at me with that mixture of pity and concern that I was beginning to recognize. Jennifer swooped in immediately, rubbing my back with practiced sympathy. She's been having some memory issues, Jennifer explained to the gathering crowd. The doctors think it might be early dementia. The word sent a ripple of sad murmurs through my family. I wanted to protest, to explain that I felt fine, that something didn't seem right about all this. But how do you argue with medical diagnoses and documented incidents? How do you convince people that you're not losing your mind when you're increasingly uncertain about your own memories? After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom, walking through my own house like a guest. In the hallway, I heard voices from the kitchen. Jennifer, David, and Carol having what they thought was a private conversation. The lawyer says we need to move quickly, Jennifer was saying. Once the power of attorney is activated, I can transfer the assets to protect them from nursing home costs. Are you sure about this? David's voice was uncertain, conflicted. Mom seems okay to me. Different, maybe, but not incompetent. She's not okay, David. Jennifer's tone was sharp, impatient. She called me at midnight last week asking about Dad, like he was still alive. She's been paying bills twice, forgetting appointments, getting lost in her own neighborhood. Dr. Peterson says it's only going to get worse. But $2 million, Carol interjected. That's a lot of money to manage. Maybe we should involve a professional financial advisor. I am the financial advisor now, Jennifer snapped. I have power of attorney. I know what's best for Mom, and what's best is keeping her money in the family instead of letting some nursing home corporation steal it all. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. They were talking about my money, my life, my future like I was already dead, like I was an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Besides, Jennifer continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, who do you think has been taking care of everything for the past year? Who drove her to every doctor's appointment, organized her medications, made sure she didn't hurt herself? I've earned the right to make decisions about her care. Earned the right? I'd given her everything: love, support, financial help when she needed it, a place to live when her marriages failed. And this was how she saw our relationship, as a transaction where caregiving earned her control over my life. David said something I couldn't quite hear, but Jennifer's response was crystal clear. She's not going to get better, David. This is progressive. In 6 months, she won't even remember our names. At least this way, we can make sure she's comfortable, and the money stays where it belongs with her family. I stumbled back to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I gripped the sink. This couldn't be happening. My own daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was planning to steal my life savings while convincing everyone, including me, that it was for my own good. But the most terrifying part wasn't the theft. It was how perfectly she'd orchestrated everything. The medical diagnosis, the documented incidents, the legal documents, the family support. She'd created an airtight case for my incompetence. And I'd helped her do it by trusting her, by doubting myself, by allowing her to become the narrator of my own story. When I returned to the backyard, everyone was watching fireworks, their faces lit by colorful explosions in the sky. I sat in my lawn chair, surrounded by family, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. These people, my son, my sister-in-law, my grandchildren, they all believed I was losing my mind. They'd accepted Jennifer's version of events without question, and now they were complicit in my financial assassination. Beautiful fireworks this year, Carol said, settling into the chair beside me. Jennifer did such a good job organizing everything. You're so lucky to have a daughter who cares so much about you. Lucky. I was lucky to have a daughter who was systematically destroying my life while making everyone believe she was saving it. Lucky to have a family who would stand by and watch it happen because they trusted her more than they trusted me. As the fireworks finale painted the sky in brilliant colors, I made a decision that would change everything. I might be confused about some things. I might have gaps in my memory. I might even be in the early stages of dementia. But I wasn't dead yet. I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't going to let Jennifer steal my life without a fight. The war for my independence was about to begin. And this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting. I needed to know how deep the deception went, how much damage had already been done, and who else was involved in the conspiracy against me. Most importantly, I needed to figure out if there was anything left of my fortune to save. The fireworks ended, and my family began cleaning up the debris. It seemed like an appropriate metaphor for what Jennifer had done to my life, created a beautiful show while leaving behind a mess that someone else would have to clean up. Except this time, I would be doing the cleaning. And when I was done, everyone would know exactly who the real Margaret Sullivan was. The day after the barbecue, I began my investigation. If Jennifer was stealing from me, there would be evidence. Money doesn't just disappear, it leaves a trail of documents, transactions, and digital footprints. I'd built my fortune by understanding every detail of my finances, and that knowledge was about to become my weapon. I started with my home office. The mahogany desk Robert had bought me for our 20th anniversary. Jennifer had organized everything so carefully over the past few months, creating neat filing systems that looked impressive but felt wrong. My old system had been chaotic, but effective. I knew where everything was because I'd put it there myself. Now, important documents were filed alphabetically in manila folders with typed labels. Bank statements were sorted by institution and date. Investment records were cross-referenced with tax documents. It was the kind of organization that impressed lawyers and doctors, the kind that made Jennifer look like a competent caregiver, managing her mother's deteriorating affairs. But when I examined the documents more closely, I found the first smoking gun. My bank statements for the past 6 months were missing several pages. The statements were there, but critical pages, the ones showing large withdrawals, had been removed and replaced with photocopies that were slightly different in color and texture. Someone had been editing my financial records. I called my bank directly, using the number from my checkbook rather than any number Jennifer might have programmed into my phone. When the customer service representative asked for my account information, I provided it from memory, something a dementia patient supposedly couldn't do. Mrs. Sullivan, I show several large withdrawals over the past 3 months. The representative confirmed. Let me pull up the details. On March 15th, a withdrawal of $50,000. March 28th, another $50,000. April 10th, $75,000. My heart sank. Who authorized these withdrawals? According to our records, you did, ma'am. You came in personally each time with proper identification. But I hadn't been to the bank in months. Jennifer had insisted on handling all my banking because crowds supposedly made me anxious. She'd been using my ATM card for smaller transactions and claiming I'd given her permission. Could you describe the person who made these withdrawals? I asked. There was a pause. Ma'am, I'd need to speak with a supervisor about accessing that information for security purposes. You understand? I understood perfectly. Someone had been impersonating me, and the bank had been fooled. The question was who and how they'd managed to fool trained professionals. Next, I examined the power of attorney documents Jennifer had helped me sign, reading through the legal language carefully, something I should have done months ago. I discovered the scope of authority I'd unknowingly granted. Jennifer could access all my accounts, sell my property, make medical decisions, even commit me to a care facility if a doctor deemed it necessary. The trigger language was particularly troubling. This power of attorney becomes effective immediately upon the principal's incapacitation as determined by one licensed physician. One physician, Dr. Peterson's diagnosis, had activated Jennifer's control over my entire life. I pulled out a magnifying glass and examined my signature on the documents. It looked right, but something felt off about the pressure, the flow of the ink. I compared it to my signature on older documents, my will from 5 years ago, property deeds, insurance policies. The differences were subtle, but noticeable if you knew what to look for. Someone had been practicing my signature. I found more evidence in my investment portfolio statements. Several of my rental properties had been sold in the past 2 months, generating over $400,000 in proceeds. The sales documents bore my signature, but I had no memory of listing the properties, meeting with realtors, or authorizing the transactions. Jennifer had assured me the properties were becoming too much work for someone my age. She'd handled all the details, she said, to spare me the stress. The money from the sales had been deposited into accounts I supposedly controlled, but had never seen statements for. I was methodically being stripped of everything I'd worked for, and the theft was being documented as legitimate transactions authorized by me. Jennifer hadn't just stolen my money, she'd created a legal framework that made the theft appear consensual. The most damaging discovery came when I found a copy of a psychiatric evaluation hidden in Jennifer's files in the guest house. Dr. Peterson had referred me to a specialist, Dr. Sarah Chen, for a comprehensive cognitive assessment. According to the report, I'd exhibited severe memory loss, confusion about basic facts, and paranoid delusions about family members. The problem was, I'd never met Dr. Chen. I had no memory of any psychiatric evaluation beyond my regular appointments with Dr. Peterson. Yet here was a detailed report describing my mental state, recommending immediate supervision and financial guardianship. Someone had fabricated a psychiatric evaluation and forged my participation in it. I sat in my office, surrounded by evidence of the most sophisticated theft I'd ever encountered. Jennifer hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen my identity, my medical history, my legal capacity, and my family's trust. She'd created an alternate reality where I was a confused, declining old woman who needed protection from herself. The genius of her plan was that every piece of evidence supported her narrative. Medical records showed cognitive decline. Bank records showed authorized withdrawals. Legal documents showed willing cooperation. Even my own family believed I was incapacitated. But Jennifer had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated her mother. I might be 72 years old. I might have moments of confusion. I might even be showing early signs of age-related cognitive changes. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't going to let her destroy everything Robert and I had built together. I gathered all the evidence, the edited bank statements, the forged signatures, the fabricated psychiatric report, the unauthorized property sales. I organized everything into a file that would make any attorney's eyes light up with the possibility of a slam-dunk case. Then I did something Jennifer would never expect from her supposedly declining mother. I got in my car and drove to the one place she couldn't control, the office of a criminal defense attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. If Jennifer wanted to play games with legal documents and medical records, I would teach her that some games have consequences she never imagined. The student was about to become the teacher, and class was about to begin. But first, I needed to understand exactly how many people were involved in this conspiracy. Was Jennifer working alone? Or did she have accomplices? Was Dr. Peterson complicit? Or had he been deceived as well? How many of my family members knew the truth about what was happening? The answers to those questions would determine whether this was a family betrayal or a criminal enterprise. Either way, Margaret Sullivan was done being anyone's victim. To understand how my daughter became capable of such betrayal, I had to examine the woman I'd raised. Jennifer hadn't always been a thief and a liar. She'd been my golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the daughter I'd spoiled with love and opportunities that I'd never had growing up. Jennifer was born during our 3rd year of marriage, when Robert and I were still living in that cramped duplex, counting every penny and dreaming of better days. She was a beautiful baby with bright eyes and an infectious laugh that could melt anyone's heart. From the moment she could walk, she commanded attention wherever we went. That little girl is going places, people would say, and I believed them. Jennifer was special gifted in school, charming with adults, naturally charismatic in ways that made everyone want to help her succeed. When David came along 3 years later, he was a sweet, quiet boy who seemed content to live in his sister's shadow. Maybe that was my first mistake, allowing Jennifer to believe she was more important than everyone else around her. When she wanted something, I found ways to get it for her. Piano lessons, dance classes, summer camps, designer clothes for school pictures. If Jennifer wanted it, Jennifer got it, even when we couldn't really afford it. She has so much potential. Margaret, her teachers would tell me, don't let anything hold her back. So I didn't. When she wanted to attend an expensive private high school, I took on extra work cleaning offices at night. When she needed money for college expenses beyond her scholarship, I sold my mother's jewelry. When she wanted a new car for graduation, Robert and I took out a loan we couldn't afford. Jennifer repaid our sacrifices by excelling at everything she touched. Valedictorian, full scholarship to college, early acceptance to law school. She was going to be the lawyer in the family, the one who would elevate the Sullivan name from working-class respectability to professional prestige. But law school was where the cracks first appeared. Jennifer struggled with the workload, with the competition from other brilliant students, with the reality that she was no longer the smartest person in every room. She called home crying, overwhelmed, talking about dropping out. "I can't do this, Mom," she sobbed over the phone. "Everyone here is smarter than me. I'm failing." Robert and I drove to Portland that weekend and took her out for dinner. We talked for hours about perseverance, about not giving up when things got difficult, about the pride we felt watching her pursue her dreams. By the end of the evening, Jennifer was ready to fight again. She finished law school, though not with the honors she'd expected. She passed the bar exam on her second try and got a job with a small firm in Salem. It wasn't the prestigious position she dreamed of, but it was a start. Robert and I attended her swearing-in ceremony, bursting with pride as our daughter raised her right hand and pledged to uphold justice. The marriage to Tom Bradshaw happened too quickly. I realized later, Tom was a successful accountant, older than Jennifer, financially stable in ways that appealed to her after years of student loans and entry-level salary. They had a beautiful wedding that cost more than our first house, with Jennifer insisting on the kind of elegant affair she'd always imagined. I should have seen the warning signs during the marriage. Jennifer stopped practicing law after 6 months, claiming the work was too stressful. She became obsessed with social status, with keeping up appearances, with maintaining a lifestyle that Tom's salary couldn't really support. When I visited their house, I noticed the credit card bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the unopened statements that suggested financial trouble. The divorce was ugly and expensive. Jennifer hired the best attorney she could find, determined to get her fair share of assets that had been mostly accumulated through debt. She moved back home afterward, claiming she needed time to get back on her feet. At 32, my successful lawyer daughter was living in my guest house, unemployed and bitter about how her life had turned out. "I gave up everything for him," she told me one evening as we sat on my back porch. "My career, my independence, my dreams. He owes me compensation for that sacrifice." But Tom hadn't asked her to give up her career. That had been Jennifer's choice, driven by her discomfort with the hard work and competition that law required. She'd preferred the easier path of being supported by someone else. And when that arrangement ended, she blamed everyone but herself. The second marriage to Rick Morrison followed a similar pattern. Rick was a construction contractor with his own business, attractive and charming in ways that made Jennifer feel desirable again. They bought a house they couldn't afford, filled it with furniture purchased on credit, and threw parties to maintain the illusion of success. I helped when I could, a few thousand here and there, when Jennifer called crying about mortgage payments or utility shutoffs. I told myself I was helping my daughter through difficult times, but looking back, I was enabling a pattern of financial irresponsibility that had been developing for years. Jennifer's second divorce was even nastier than the first. Rick's business had failed during the recession, and there were no assets to divide, only debts. Jennifer emerged from the marriage with nothing but bills and a growing resentment toward everyone who seemed to have more than she did. That's when she moved into my guest house temporarily and began taking such an active interest in my finances. At first, I was grateful for her attention. She helped organize my papers, reminded me about bill due dates, and offered to handle errands when I felt overwhelmed. It seemed like she was finally maturing, taking responsibility, trying to contribute to the household that was supporting her. But the most shocking discovery was finding evidence that Jennifer had recruited accomplices outside the family. Her boyfriend Marcus, the personal trainer I'd met at the barbecue, had been actively involved in the deception. Text messages revealed that Marcus had posed as my nephew during phone calls to my bank and investment companies, claiming to be concerned about my mental state and requesting information about my accounts. He'd also impersonated a family friend when calling my insurance company to inquire about benefits for dementia patients. Marcus wasn't motivated by family loyalty or genuine concern. He was motivated by the promise of financial reward. Jennifer had apparently offered him a percentage of whatever money she managed to steal, turning my financial destruction into a business partnership. The old lady's got way more than I thought. Marcus had texted Jennifer, "This could set us up for life if we play it right." Jennifer's response revealed the calculating nature of her scheme. "Just stick to the script." Concerned family member, worried about her safety, needs information to help protect her. They eat that shit up every time. Even Dr. Peterson had been manipulated, though I was relieved to discover he wasn't a willing participant in the fraud. Jennifer had been providing him with carefully documented evidence of my supposed decline, detailed incident reports, witnesses to my confusion, and her own observations as my primary caregiver to Dr. Peterson. Jennifer appeared to be a devoted daughter desperately trying to help her declining mother. He'd based his diagnosis on the information she'd provided because he'd had no reason to doubt her truthfulness. Medical professionals are trained to trust family members who present as concerned caregivers. The psychiatric report from Dr. Chen that I'd found in Jennifer's files was more troubling. Further investigation revealed that Dr. Chen was a real psychiatrist, but the report itself was a fabrication. Jennifer had somehow obtained Dr. Chen's letterhead and created a detailed psychological evaluation that had never actually taken place. The level of sophistication required to forge medical documents suggested that Jennifer had help from someone with professional expertise, whether that was Marcus using his contacts in the fitness industry, a corrupt medical professional, or someone else entirely. I couldn't yet determine. What was clear was that Jennifer had assembled a team of accomplices, manipulated family members into supporting her narrative, and deceived medical professionals into providing the documentation she needed. She'd created a comprehensive false reality where everyone believed Margaret Sullivan was losing her mind. Everyone except Margaret Sullivan herself. The conspiracy involved my own children, my sister-in-law, my grandchildren, my daughter's boyfriend, and possibly corrupt professionals willing to forge medical documents for money. They'd all played their parts in the systematic destruction of my independence and the theft of my life savings. But they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed that a woman who'd built a fortune from nothing, who'd survived poverty and loss and decades of financial challenges, would be helpless to defend herself against their elaborate scheme. They were about to learn that Margaret Sullivan hadn't survived 72 years by being anyone's victim, and that sometimes the quietest people are the most dangerous when they finally decide to fight back. The supporting cast had played their roles perfectly. Now it was time for them to discover that the star of this show was about to rewrite the ending. The next morning, I drove to First National Bank, where I'd been a customer for over 25 years. I needed to understand exactly how Jennifer had managed to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from accounts that required my personal authorization. What I discovered was a sophisticated fraud that had fooled trained banking professionals and cost me nearly half my life savings. Sandra Martinez had been my personal banker for 15 years. She'd handled our business loans when Robert and I were building our real estate portfolio, had processed the life insurance payments after his death, and had always treated me with the respect due a valued customer. When I walked into her office that Tuesday morning, her expression immediately shifted to one of concern and pity. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said, her voice taking on that careful tone I'd grown to hate. "How are you feeling today? Jennifer told us you've been having some difficult times lately." Jennifer had been here, spinning her web of lies with the same skill she'd used on my family and doctors. I sat across from Sandra's desk, maintaining perfect composure despite the rage building inside me. "I'm feeling quite well, actually," I said calmly. I'd like to review my account activity for the past 6 months. All of it. Sandra's discomfort was visible. Of course, Mrs. Sullivan. Though I should mention that Jennifer asked us to call her whenever you came in, just to make sure someone was here to help if you became confused about anything. How thoughtful of her, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But I won't be needing Jennifer's assistance today. I'm here to review my own accounts as the account holder. I assume you can accommodate that request. The printouts Sandra provided told a horrifying story. In the past 4 months, there had been 8 large withdrawals, totaling over $400,000. Each withdrawal had been made in person by someone claiming to be me, with proper identification and knowledge of my account details. Could you show me the security footage from these withdrawal dates? I asked. Sandra hesitated. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm not sure I'm the account holder. I interrupted firmly. Someone has been making withdrawals from my account, and I have the right to verify who that someone was, unless, of course, you're suggesting I don't have the mental capacity to review my own banking records. The challenge in my voice made Sandra realize she was dealing with a very different Margaret Sullivan than the confused woman Jennifer had described. She called her supervisor, who authorized access to the security footage. Watching the videos was like seeing a stranger wearing my identity. The woman in the footage looked like me from a distance, similar height, build, and hair color. She wore clothes I recognized from my own closet and carried a purse identical to my everyday handbag. But when the camera captured her face clearly, I could see it wasn't me at all. It was Jennifer, wearing a gray wig and makeup that aged her appearance. She'd practiced my signature, studied my mannerisms, and even wore my clothes to complete the impersonation. The transformation was sophisticated, enough to fool bank employees who saw hundreds of customers every day. This isn't me, I told Sandra quietly. This is my daughter Jennifer, committing fraud by impersonating me. Sandra's face went pale. Mrs. Sullivan, that's a very serious accusation. Are you certain you didn't authorize these withdrawals? Sometimes memory issues can. I've never had memory issues, I interrupted. That's another lie Jennifer has been spreading to cover her theft. This woman is not me. These withdrawals were not authorized by me, and I want to file a fraud report immediately. The bank manager, Robert Chan, was called to handle what was becoming a major problem for the institution. He reviewed the footage with fresh eyes, comparing it to my driver's license photo and other identification in my file. The resemblance is remarkable, he admitted, but now that you've pointed it out, I can see the differences. The facial structure, the way she moves, even her voice when she speaks to the tellers. Chen pulled up additional security footage showing Jennifer's visits to the bank over the past year. In earlier videos, she'd accompanied me for legitimate transactions, studying how I interacted with staff, learning my banking habits and preferences. She'd been planning this impersonation for months. How did she access my account information? I asked. She would have needed more than just my identification to make these withdrawals. The answer was even more disturbing. Jennifer had used her power of attorney documents to have herself added to my accounts as an authorized user. She'd claimed it was necessary for managing my finances during my episodes of confusion. The bank had required medical documentation of my incapacity, which Jennifer had provided through Dr. Peterson's diagnosis. She told us you'd become afraid of banks, that crowds made you anxious, Sandra explained. She said you'd asked her to handle all banking transactions to reduce your stress. We thought we were helping accommodate a customer's medical needs. Jennifer had created a perfect cover story. She wasn't stealing, she was protecting her confused mother from the stress of financial management. The bank employees weren't witnesses to fraud, they were helping a devoted daughter care for her declining parent. But the security footage revealed the truth. Jennifer had been systematically emptying my accounts while making it appear that I was making the withdrawals myself. She'd even timed her visits for days when she could establish alibis for my whereabouts, calling in sick for doctor's appointments or claiming I was having bad days and staying home. What about the deposits? I asked, reviewing the account summary. Where did the money from my property sales go? Chen showed me records of several large deposits that had been immediately transferred to other accounts. The property sales Jennifer had supposedly helped me with had generated nearly $500,000, but none of that money remained in my primary accounts. These transfers were authorized by your power of attorney, Chen explained. The funds were moved to what Jennifer described as secure investment accounts, better suited for someone with your condition. Investment accounts I'd never seen statements for, never authorized, and didn't know existed. Jennifer had been funneling my money into accounts she controlled while making it appear that the transfers were legitimate asset protection strategies. The sophistication of the fraud was staggering. Jennifer had used my own legal documents against me, my medical diagnosis as cover, and my reputation as a confused elderly woman to gain access to my life savings. She'd fooled bank employees, medical professionals, and family members into believing she was protecting me while she systematically robbed me. I want to file criminal charges, I told Chen. This is identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse. I want every transaction reversed, every stolen dollar recovered, and every person involved in this conspiracy prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Chen's expression was grave. Mrs. Sullivan, I understand your anger, but the legal situation is complicated. Jennifer has valid power of attorney documents and medical evidence supporting her authority to manage your finances. Proving fraud will require exactly what I'm giving you. I interrupted. Security footage of someone impersonating me, forged medical documents, and theft of funds from accounts are never authorized. This isn't complicated, it's criminal. I spent the next 3 hours documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged authorization, every lie Jennifer had told to gain access to my money. The bank's legal department was called in to review the evidence, and by the end of the day, they'd agreed to freeze all remaining accounts and begin their own investigation. But the damage was already done. Of my original $2 million, less than $800,000 remained in accounts I could access. Jennifer had stolen over $1.2 million in just 4 months, and most of that money had been transferred to accounts beyond the bank's immediate reach. As I drove home that evening, I realized that Jennifer's theft had been even more sophisticated than I'd initially understood. She hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen my identity, my legal capacity, and my family's trust. She'd created a fictional version of Margaret Sullivan that everyone believed was real. But fiction, no matter how convincing, can't stand up to facts. And Margaret Sullivan was about to provide more facts than Jennifer could possibly explain away. The bank conspiracy was just the beginning. Tomorrow, I would start unraveling every lie, exposing every fraud, and holding every person involved accountable for their role in the systematic destruction of my life. Jennifer had taught me a valuable lesson about the power of documentation and preparation. Now I was going to teach her a lesson about the consequences of underestimating the woman who'd raised her. I knew that exposing Jennifer's fraud would require more than my word against hers. She'd spent months building a comprehensive narrative of my supposed mental decline, complete with medical documentation and witness testimony to fight back. Effectively, I needed my own evidence, ironclad proof that would demolish every lie she'd told about my condition and her motives. My first call was to Patricia Holmes, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse. Patricia came highly recommended by the criminal attorney I'd consulted, and her credentials were impressive. 20 years as a police detective before starting her own firm, with a particular expertise in cases involving family financial fraud. Mrs. Sullivan, Patricia said when we met at a coffee shop across town, I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided. This is one of the most sophisticated elder abuse schemes I've encountered. Your daughter didn't just steal money, she created an entire false reality to justify the theft. Patricia's investigation plan was thorough and methodical. We would need to prove 3 critical points: that I was mentally competent, despite medical claims to the contrary; that Jennifer had systematically stolen my assets through fraud and forgery; and that she'd recruited accomplices to support her deception. The medical evidence will be crucial, Patricia explained. We need independent evaluations from doctors who haven't been influenced by Jennifer's narrative, cognitive tests, psychological assessments, even brain scans if necessary to prove you don't have dementia. I scheduled appointments with 2 different neurologists and a geriatric psychiatrist, all recommended by Patricia's network of medical professionals. These doctors had no prior knowledge of my case, no relationship with Jennifer, and no preconceived notions about my mental state. Dr. Maria Santos, the neurologist, conducted the most comprehensive cognitive evaluation I'd ever experienced. For 3 hours, she tested my memory, reasoning ability, language skills, and problem-solving capacity. She administered standardized tests used to diagnose dementia and cognitive decline. Mrs. Sullivan, Dr. Santos said, as she reviewed my results, I see no evidence of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. Your test scores are well within normal ranges for someone your age. In fact, your performance on several assessments was above average. She compared my results to the supposed evaluation Dr. Peterson had referenced in his diagnosis. The discrepancies were stark where Dr. Peterson's notes indicated severe memory problems. Dr. Santos found normal age-appropriate function, where he documented confusion and disorientation. She found sharp analytical thinking and perfect recall. Either you've experienced a miraculous recovery from severe dementia, Dr. Santos said, with a wry smile, or someone has been providing inaccurate information about your condition. The psychiatric evaluation with Dr. James Mitchell provided similar results. He conducted detailed interviews about my mental state, family relationships, and emotional well-being. His assessment painted a picture of a woman dealing with normal grief and stress, not someone suffering from paranoid delusions or psychological decline. You show no signs of the psychiatric symptoms described in your previous evaluations, Dr. Mitchell concluded. Your emotional responses are appropriate, your thought processes are clear, and your concerns about financial exploitation appear to be reality-based rather than delusional. Armed with legitimate medical evidence of my competency, Patricia began investigating the financial crimes. She subpoenaed bank records from multiple institutions, traced the movement of my stolen assets, and documented the paper trail Jennifer had left behind. The investigation revealed that Jennifer had been planning this theft for over a year. She'd opened multiple accounts using variations of my name and personal information, had researched power of attorney laws and medical guardianship procedures, and had even practiced forging my signature on documents that Patricia found hidden in the guest house. Your daughter is methodical, Patricia observed as we reviewed the evidence. She documented everything, kept detailed records, and planned every aspect of this fraud. Unfortunately for her, that means we have a complete record of her criminal activity. Patricia's team also uncovered Jennifer's gambling addiction through credit card records and casino surveillance footage. The scope of her debts was staggering: over $300,000 owed to various creditors, with threats of legal action and wage garnishment forcing her to desperate measures. This wasn't opportunistic theft, Patricia explained. Jennifer was facing financial ruin and saw your assets as her solution. The medical deception was just the cover story that made the theft appear legal and justified. Most damaging to Jennifer's narrative was the discovery of her planning documents. Patricia found detailed notes in Jennifer's handwriting outlining her strategy: which family members to recruit, which medical professionals to deceive, and how to gradually transfer my assets without triggering suspicion. One notebook contained a timeline of planned incidents that would demonstrate my declining condition: the salted green beans, the missing checkbook, the grocery store confusion. Jennifer had orchestrated every episode that convinced my family and doctors that I was losing my mind. She even practiced your mannerisms for the bank impersonation," Patricia noted, showing me videos from Jennifer's phone. Hours of footage of her studying your movements, your speech patterns, your way of signing documents. This was a professional-level fraud operation. The investigation also revealed the extent of Marcus's involvement. Patricia traced phone calls he'd made to my financial institutions, documented his use of fake identities to gather information about my accounts, and even found evidence that he'd researched my family history to make his impersonations more convincing. "Your daughter's boyfriend isn't just an accomplice," Patricia said grimly. "He's a career criminal with a history of identity theft and financial fraud." Jennifer didn't just recruit him, she partnered with a professional con artist. Dr. Peterson's role in the conspiracy proved to be more complicated than I'd initially thought. While he hadn't knowingly participated in fraud, his willingness to accept Jennifer's version of events without independent verification had made him an unwitting accomplice. We developed a plan for the social worker's visit. I would cooperate fully with the assessment, demonstrate my competency through my responses, and subtly gather information about what Jennifer had told them in advance. Patricia would be monitoring the situation from nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. The social worker, Maria Gonzalez, arrived the next morning with a clipboard full of standardized assessment forms. She was professional, but clearly influenced by the information Jennifer had provided. During their preliminary phone conversations, "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand you've been having some difficulties lately," she began gently. "Your daughter is concerned about your ability to live safely on your own." I answered every question clearly and precisely, demonstrating my cognitive abilities while maintaining the appearance of cooperation. When asked about my daily routines, I provided detailed descriptions of my activities. When questioned about medication management, I accurately listed my prescriptions and dosages. When tested on basic orientation, I correctly identified the date, location, and current events. Ms. Gonzalez seemed surprised by my responses. "You appear quite alert and oriented, Mrs. Sullivan. Your daughter mentioned episodes of confusion and memory loss. Have you experienced anything like that recently?" "I feel quite sharp mentally," I replied honestly, "though Jennifer seems to think I've been having problems. Perhaps she's more worried than necessary." Jennifer, who had been hovering nearby during the assessment, quickly interjected with examples of my supposed decline. She recounted incidents I didn't remember, described behaviors I'd never exhibited, and painted a picture of a woman far more impaired than the person sitting in front of Ms. Gonzalez. "Mom doesn't always remember her episodes," Jennifer explained with practiced concern. "That's part of the condition. She can seem perfectly normal one moment and completely confused the next." It was a clever strategy. Any evidence of my competency could be dismissed as temporary lucidity between episodes of decline. Jennifer had created an unfalsifiable narrative where my apparent wellness only proved how sick I really was. But Ms. Gonzalez was more experienced than Jennifer had anticipated. She'd conducted hundreds of these assessments and knew the difference between genuine cognitive impairment and family manipulation. "I'd like to speak with Mrs. Sullivan privately," she told Jennifer. Standard procedure for these evaluations. Jennifer's discomfort was visible, but she couldn't object without appearing suspicious. She reluctantly left us alone, though I suspected she was listening from the kitchen. "Mrs. Sullivan," Ms. Gonzalez said quietly, "I have to ask, do you feel safe in this living situation? Do you feel pressured or coerced by anyone regarding your living arrangements?" The question revealed that Ms. Gonzalez had suspicions about Jennifer's motives. This was my opportunity to tell the truth, to expose the fraud, to prevent my involuntary commitment to a facility. "I feel perfectly safe," I said carefully, "though I'm concerned about some financial irregularities I've discovered recently, large withdrawals from my accounts that I don't remember authorizing." Ms. Gonzalez made notes on her form. "Have you discussed these concerns with your daughter?" "Not yet," I wanted to investigate further before making any accusations. Our conversation was interrupted by Jennifer's return, claiming she needed to show Ms. Gonzalez some medical documents. But the damage was done. The social worker had heard enough to question the narrative she'd been given. Ms. Gonzalez completed her assessment without recommending immediate institutional placement. Instead, she suggested follow-up evaluations and family counseling to address the apparent disagreement about my care needs. After she left, Jennifer was furious, though she tried to hide it behind a mask of disappointment. I don't understand why she didn't see what Dr. Peterson and I see, Jennifer complained. You were obviously having a good day, but that doesn't mean you don't need help. A good day. As if my competency was a temporary condition that would inevitably deteriorate. Jennifer was already planning her next move, probably a second opinion from a more cooperative social worker or additional medical documentation to support her claims, but she'd made a critical error. By rushing the nursing home placement, she'd revealed the urgency of her situation and attracted the suspicion of a trained professional. Ms. Gonzalez's report would become part of my case file, documenting that I appeared competent and raised concerns about financial exploitation. Jennifer's perfect plan was starting to unravel, and she was running out of time to complete the theft that was supposed to solve all her problems. She'd underestimated both my ability to defend myself and the difficulty of fooling everyone forever. The nursing home threat had been Jennifer's final gambit, her last attempt to remove me from the equation entirely. Its failure marked the beginning of the end of her elaborate deception. Tomorrow, I would begin the counterattack that would expose every lie, recover every stolen dollar, and hold every accomplice accountable for their role in the systematic destruction of my life. Jennifer had taught me the power of careful planning and documentation. Now I would teach her the consequences of betraying the woman who'd given her everything. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison came highly recommended by Patricia Holmes as the most respected geriatric psychiatrist in the Pacific Northwest. Unlike Dr. Peterson, who had been manipulated by Jennifer's carefully crafted narrative, Dr. Morrison specialized in distinguishing between genuine cognitive decline and cases where family members fabricated symptoms for personal gain. Mrs. Sullivan, Dr. Morrison said, as we settled into her comfortable office, I understand you're seeking an independent evaluation of your mental state. Can you tell me what prompted this request? I explained the situation carefully, my daughter's claims about my declining condition, the medical diagnosis that seemed inconsistent with my own experience, and the growing concerns about financial irregularities. Dr. Morrison listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. Before we begin formal testing, she said, I'd like to understand your perspective on the incidents your daughter has documented. Do you remember the episodes she's described to other medical professionals? This was the moment of truth. For months, I'd been gaslighted into doubting my own memories, questioning my perceptions, and accepting Jennifer's version of events. But sitting in Dr. Morrison's office, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I don't remember most of the incidents Jennifer has described, I said firmly. The grocery store confusion, the repeated phone calls, the episodes of disorientation. Either they didn't happen, or they've been significantly exaggerated. Dr. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. In cases of genuine dementia, patients often don't remember their episodes of confusion, but in cases of manufactured symptoms, the absence of memory is because the events never occurred. She administered a comprehensive battery of cognitive tests that took nearly 4 hours. Unlike the brief assessments Dr. Peterson had conducted, Dr. Morrison's evaluation was thorough and sophisticated, designed to detect both genuine impairment and attempts at deception. The tests included memory assessments, problem-solving exercises, language evaluations, and executive function challenges. Dr. Morrison also conducted detailed interviews about my life history, my relationships, and my emotional state. Mrs. Sullivan, she said as we completed the final assessment. I need to ask you directly, have you ever experienced any of the symptoms your daughter has described? Memory lapses, confusion about familiar people or places, difficulty with basic tasks. I've had normal age-related moments, I replied honestly, occasionally forgetting where I put my keys or needing a moment to recall someone's name. But nothing like the dramatic episodes Jennifer has documented. Dr. Morrison reviewed my test results with the kind of thoroughness that had been missing from my previous evaluations. She compared my performance to age-appropriate norms, looked for patterns that might indicate early cognitive decline, and assessed my emotional state for signs of depression or anxiety that might affect my thinking. Mrs. Sullivan, your cognitive function is well within normal limits for someone your age, she concluded. In fact, your performance on several tests was above average. I see no evidence of dementia, mild cognitive impairment, or any other condition that would affect your ability to make decisions or manage your affairs. The relief I felt was overwhelming. For months, I'd been told by medical professionals that my mind was failing, that I was losing the capacity to think clearly and make rational decisions. Hearing an expert confirm what I'd known all along, that I was mentally competent, felt like being granted a reprieve from a death sentence. But what about the symptoms Jennifer has documented? I asked. The medical reports, the witness statements, the evidence of my declining condition. Dr. Morrison's expression grew serious. In my professional opinion, those symptoms have been fabricated or greatly exaggerated. What you're describing is consistent with a pattern I've seen in cases of psychological manipulation designed to support financial exploitation. She explained the psychological dynamics of what Jennifer had done to me by consistently questioning my memory, documenting non-existent incidents, and recruiting others to support her narrative. Jennifer had created a form of gaslighting that was particularly effective against elderly victims. Your daughter used your natural trust in family members against you, Dr. Morrison explained. When someone we love tells us we're losing our minds, we tend to believe them, especially when they provide what appears to be medical evidence. Dr. Morrison had encountered similar cases where adult children fabricated symptoms of dementia to justify taking control of their parents' finances. The pattern was always the same: gradual documentation of supposed decline, recruitment of medical professionals through selective presentation of information, and isolation of the victim from outside perspectives. The key indicator in your case is the sudden onset, she noted. Genuine dementia typically develops gradually over years. Your daughter is claiming you developed severe symptoms in a matter of months, which is inconsistent with natural disease progression. More damaging to Jennifer's narrative was Dr. Morrison's analysis of the supposed psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Chen. As an expert in geriatric mental health, Dr. Morrison immediately recognized the document as a fabrication. This report contains several red flags, she explained, reviewing the forged evaluation. The language is inconsistent with professional standards. The test results don't align with described symptoms, and the conclusions are far more definitive than any responsible psychiatrist would make after a single evaluation. Dr. Morrison's investigation revealed that the real Dr. Chen had never met me or conducted any evaluation. The letterhead had been stolen or reproduced, and the entire document was a complete fabrication designed to support Jennifer's claims about my mental state. This is criminal fraud, Dr. Morrison said bluntly. Creating false medical documents is a serious felony, especially when used to justify financial exploitation of elderly individuals. She agreed to provide a comprehensive written report documenting my mental competency, the fabricated nature of previous evaluations, and her professional opinion that I had been the victim of systematic psychological manipulation. This report would serve as crucial evidence in any legal proceedings against Jennifer. Mrs. Sullivan, Dr. Morrison said, as our session concluded, I want you to understand that there is nothing wrong with your mind. You've been the victim of sophisticated psychological abuse, designed to make you doubt your own perceptions. The confusion you've experienced isn't cognitive decline, it's the natural result of being gaslit by someone you trusted. Driving home from Dr. Morrison's office, I felt like a different person than the confused, doubting woman who had entered that morning. I had official medical confirmation that my mind was sharp, my judgment was sound, and my concerns about Jennifer's behavior were entirely rational. For months, I'd been living in a world where my own daughter convinced everyone, including me, that I was losing my mental capacity. The isolation and self-doubt had been as devastating as the financial theft. But now I had proof that I was the same intelligent, capable woman I'd always been. Jennifer's psychological manipulation had been the foundation of her entire scheme. By making me doubt my own memory and judgment, she'd created a situation where I was unable to effectively challenge her version of events. The medical diagnosis of dementia had been the key that unlocked access to my finances and legal autonomy. But Dr. Morrison's evaluation had exposed the fraud at the heart of Jennifer's plan. There was no dementia, no cognitive decline, no medical justification for the financial guardianship Jennifer had established. Everything had been built on lies, and now I had the medical evidence to prove it. That evening, I called Patricia Holmes to share the results of Dr. Morrison's evaluation. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "This changes everything," Patricia said. "With medical evidence proving your competency, Jennifer's entire justification for controlling your finances collapses. We can challenge the power of attorney, reverse the unauthorized transactions, and pursue criminal charges for fraud." The next phase of my counterattack would begin with medical truth replacing medical fiction. Dr. Morrison's report would serve as the foundation for everything that followed: the legal challenges, the criminal charges, and the complete exposure of Jennifer's elaborate deception. My daughter had underestimated the woman who'd raised her. She'd assumed that an elderly mother would be too confused, too isolated, and too dependent to fight back effectively. She'd forgotten that the same intelligence that built a $2 million fortune was still fully operational and now focused entirely on seeking justice. Jennifer's perfect crime was about to become her perfect downfall. And this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative. Armed with Dr. Morrison's comprehensive evaluation and Patricia Holmes's investigation file, I walked into the offices of Blackwood and Associates, the most respected elder law firm in Portland. Thomas Blackwood himself agreed to take my case after reviewing the evidence, his expression growing darker with each page of documentation. "Double quotes, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "In 30 years of practicing elder law, I've never seen a more sophisticated fraud perpetrated against a family member. Your daughter didn't just steal money, she stole your identity, your autonomy, and your family relationships." Thomas's strategy was multi-pronged and aggressive. We would simultaneously pursue criminal charges against Jennifer and her accomplices, file civil lawsuits to recover my stolen assets, and seek emergency court orders to reverse the fraudulent power of attorney that had enabled the theft. "The beauty of your case," Thomas explained, "is that Jennifer documented everything. She kept detailed records of her supposed caregiving, her financial transactions, even her planning for the fraud. What she thought was evidence of legitimacy is actually proof of premeditation." Our first filing was a petition to have the power of attorney declared invalid due to fraud in its creation. Dr. Morrison's evaluation proving my mental competency directly contradicted the medical evidence Jennifer had used to justify the document. If the power of attorney was invalid, every financial transaction Jennifer had authorized became unauthorized theft. "We're also filing for emergency asset protection," Thomas continued. "Every account Jennifer has access to will be frozen until the court can sort out what belongs to whom. She won't be able to steal another penny while this case proceeds." The criminal referral went to the Portland District Attorney's Office, specifically to their white-collar crime division. The evidence file was massive bank records, security footage, forged documents, medical fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez agreed to fast-track the investigation given the strength of the evidence. This isn't a typical family dispute, she told Thomas during their initial meeting. This is organized criminal activity with multiple felony counts. If we can prove everything you've documented, Jennifer Sullivan is looking at serious prison time. The charges being considered were extensive: identity theft, financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery of legal documents, fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. Marcus would face additional charges for his role in the conspiracy, and any other accomplices would be charged based on their level of involvement. We're treating this as we would any major fraud case, Ada Martinez explained to me during our first meeting. The fact that the perpetrator is your daughter doesn't change the seriousness of the crimes or our commitment to prosecution. While the criminal case developed, Thomas filed civil lawsuits against everyone involved in the conspiracy. Jennifer faced claims for conversion, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Marcus was sued for conspiracy and aiding and abetting the theft. Even Dr. Peterson faced a malpractice claim for his negligent diagnosis that enabled the fraud. Civil court moves faster than criminal court, Thomas explained. We can recover your assets and get you compensation for damages while the criminal case proceeds. Justice served twice: financial recovery and criminal accountability. The emergency hearing for asset protection was scheduled within a week. Jennifer would have to appear in court to explain her financial transactions and justify her control over my assets. For the first time, she would face hostile questioning from someone who couldn't be manipulated or deceived. I insisted on attending the hearing, despite Thomas's suggestion that I might find it emotionally difficult. I wanted to see Jennifer's face when she realized her perfect crime had been exposed, when she understood that the confused old woman she'd been stealing from had been building a case against her. Judge Patricia Reeves presided over the emergency hearing with the efficiency of someone who'd seen too many cases of family financial abuse. She reviewed our evidence packet before Jennifer even arrived, her expression growing stern as she absorbed the scope of the fraud. When Jennifer entered the courtroom with her hastily hired attorney, she looked confident, still believing she could charm her way out of any legal troubles. She wore a conservative suit and carried herself with the dignity of a concerned daughter, protecting her aging mother's interests. That confidence evaporated when Judge Reeves began questioning her about specific transactions. Ms. Sullivan, the judge said, consulting the bank records, can you explain the withdrawal of $50,000 on March 15th? What was this money used for? Jennifer's attorney whispered in her ear before she answered. Your Honor, that withdrawal was made by my mother for home improvements. I was simply helping her manage the transaction because crowds make her anxious. Yet, according to the bank's security footage, Judge Reeves continued, you were the person who made this withdrawal, wearing a disguise and impersonating your mother. How do you explain that? The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Jennifer's attorney frantically flipping through papers. They hadn't expected the level of evidence we'd assembled, hadn't prepared for the detailed documentation of Jennifer's crimes. Your Honor, Jennifer's attorney stammered. My client was acting under valid power of attorney documents to protect her mother's interests. Any irregularities in procedure were criminal fraud. Judge Reeves interrupted. The power of attorney was obtained through medical fraud, as evidenced by Dr. Morrison's evaluation, proving Mrs. Sullivan's competency. Every transaction authorized under that document is therefore unauthorized theft. Thomas presented our evidence methodically: the forged medical documents, the fabricated psychiatric evaluation, the documented identity theft, the systematic financial exploitation. Each piece of evidence demolished another aspect of Jennifer's defense. When Judge Reeves asked me to testify about my mental state and my awareness of the financial transactions, I spoke clearly and confidently about my competency, my lack of knowledge about the withdrawals, and my discovery of Jennifer's betrayal. "Mrs. Sullivan," the judge said, "you appear to be a competent, articulate woman with no signs of the cognitive impairment described in previous medical evaluations. Have you ever authorized your daughter to make large withdrawals from your accounts?" "Never, Your Honor. I had no knowledge of these transactions until I began investigating irregularities in my bank statements. I've been financially independent my entire life and have never needed assistance managing my money." Judge Reeves's ruling was swift and comprehensive. The power of attorney was declared invalid due to fraud. All accounts Jennifer had access to were immediately frozen. Any assets that could be traced to my stolen funds were to be held in escrow pending resolution of the case. Furthermore, Judge Reeves announced, "I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting Jennifer Sullivan from any contact with her mother or access to any of her mother's financial accounts, properties, or personal information. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest." Jennifer's face went white as the implications sank in. Not only had her theft been exposed, but she was now cut off from any remaining assets and prohibited from attempting further manipulation. The restraining order meant she couldn't even return to the guest house where she'd been living. As we left the courthouse, Thomas was already planning the next phase of our legal assault. "This was just the emergency hearing," he explained. "Now we begin the real work of recovering your assets and holding everyone accountable for their actions." The criminal investigation was proceeding in parallel, with Ada Martinez's team conducting interviews, analyzing evidence, and preparing formal charges. Patricia Holmes was continuing her investigation to identify any additional accomplices or hidden assets. Double quotes Mrs. Sullivan, Thomas said as we reached his car. "I want you to understand what we've accomplished today. 6 months ago, your daughter had control of your life, your money, and your reputation. Today, she has nothing but legal troubles and the certainty that her crimes will be punished." That evening, I sat in my own house, where I would continue living independently and reflected on the day's events. For months, I'd been treated like a confused old woman who needed protection from herself. Today, I'd been recognized by a court of law as a competent victim of sophisticated fraud. Jennifer's elaborate scheme had been built on the assumption that I would never fight back, never question her version of events, never discover the truth about what she was doing. She'd underestimated the woman who'd raised her, and that mistake would cost her everything. The legal warfare had begun, and I intended to win every battle. Justice might be slow, but it was coming for everyone who'd participated in the systematic destruction of my life. And when it arrived, they would learn that Margaret Sullivan had been underestimated for the last time. The restraining order meant Jennifer couldn't return to my property to collect her belongings, but I knew she would try to contact me somehow. She'd spent too many months manipulating me to give up easily, and her financial desperation would make her even more dangerous. When she finally made her move, I was ready. The call came 3 days after the court hearing, from a number I didn't recognize. Jennifer's voice was different, no longer the patient, concerned daughter, but desperate and angry. "Mom, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "You don't understand what you're doing. Those lawyers are filling your head with lies, taking advantage of your confusion." Even now, even after being exposed in court, Jennifer was still trying to gaslight me. The audacity was breathtaking, but also revealing. She genuinely believed she could talk her way out of this situation if she could just get to me directly. "I understand perfectly, Jennifer," I replied calmly. "I understand that you've been stealing from me for months, while convincing everyone I was losing my mind. I understand that you forged medical documents, impersonated me at banks, and recruited accomplices to help you steal my life savings." There was silence on the other end of the line. Jennifer hadn't expected this level of awareness from the confused mother. She'd been manipulating. "Mom, listen to me," she said, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she'd perfected over the months of deception. "I was protecting your money. Do you have any idea how many elderly people lose everything to scams and poor decisions? I was keeping your assets safe until you recovered." "Recovered from what?" "Jennifer, the dementia I don't have, the cognitive decline that multiple doctors have now confirmed doesn't exist." Jennifer's strategy shifted, becoming more aggressive. "You're being manipulated by these lawyers and investigators. They're telling you what you want to hear so they can steal your money legally. At least when I was managing your finances, I was keeping everything in the family." The victim blaming was classic Jennifer. Nothing was ever her fault. Everyone else was always the real problem. But I'd spent weeks preparing for this conversation, and I had one more surprise for my daughter. "Actually, Jennifer, I've been recording our conversations for months, including this one." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was barely controlled rage. "You manipulative bitch. I've been taking care of you, sacrificing my life to make sure you were safe. And this is how you repay me?" The mask was finally off. No more concerned daughter. No more patient caregiver. This was the real Jennifer, entitled, angry, and furious that her victim had fought back. "Taking care of me?" I laughed bitterly. "You stole over $1 million from me, Jennifer. You convinced my family I was losing my mind. You tried to have me committed to a nursing home so you could finish stealing everything I worked for. That's not caregiving, that's elder abuse. I earned that money." Jennifer screamed. "Do you have any idea what I've given up for you? My career, my relationships, my independence. I've been living in your guest house like a servant, dealing with your confusion and paranoia, managing your entire life. I deserve compensation for what I've sacrificed." "You didn't sacrifice anything, Jennifer. You moved in here because you'd run out of money and needed a place to live. You invented my confusion to cover your theft, and you managed my life only so you could steal from it." The conversation was being recorded, as I'd warned her, but more importantly, it was taking place on a three-way call, with Patricia Holmes monitoring. Jennifer's admissions were being documented by a professional investigator for use in the criminal case. "Besides," I continued, "I know about the gambling, Jennifer. I know about the debts, the threats from creditors, the desperate situation that motivated all of this." Jennifer's sharp intake of breath told me this revelation hit home. She'd thought her financial problems were secret, but Patricia's investigation had uncovered everything. The addiction treatment program, the casino, receipts, the $200,000 in credit card debt. "I know it all. You didn't steal from me to protect me. You stole from me to feed your gambling addiction." When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you've done. Mom, when this gets out, the whole family will know what kind of person you really are. Your grandchildren will learn that their grandmother destroyed their aunt's life over money. David will have to choose between his mother and his sister." The threats were predictable, but still painful. Jennifer was going to weaponize my relationships with family members, turning my pursuit of justice into evidence of my vindictiveness. "They're already choosing. Jennifer, David knows about the theft. He's horrified by what you've done, but he's more horrified that he almost helped you do it. Your children are ashamed that their mother is a criminal who preyed on her own family." That wasn't entirely true. David was conflicted, and I hadn't spoken to my grandchildren yet. But I wanted Jennifer to understand that her actions had consequences beyond legal troubles. "You're 72 years old, Mom. How many years do you have left to enjoy your precious money? You could have spent your final years being cared for by a daughter who loved you, instead of dying alone while lawyers spend your inheritance on legal fees." The manipulation was so transparent, so perfectly Jennifer, that I almost admired its audacity. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to make this my fault, still positioning herself as the victim of my unreasonable expectations. I'm going to spend my remaining years enjoying the money I earned through decades of hard work, I replied. Money that you had no right to steal, regardless of your financial problems or your sense of entitlement. Jennifer's final attempt at manipulation was the most revealing. Fine, but remember, when you're sitting alone in that house with all your precious money, that you chose money over family. You chose lawyers over your own daughter. No, Jennifer, you chose gambling over family. You chose theft over honesty. You chose to destroy our relationship for money. I'm just choosing to hold you accountable for those choices. The line went dead. Jennifer had hung up in defeat, her attempts at manipulation thoroughly defeated by a mother who was no longer willing to be victimized. Patricia Holmes called me back immediately. Mrs. Sullivan, that recording is incredibly valuable. Jennifer just confessed to theft, admitted her financial motivation, and revealed her understanding that her actions were wrong. Her own words will convict her, but the emotional impact of the conversation was harder to process than its legal value. For nearly an hour, I'd been talking to a stranger, wearing my daughter's voice. The loving, complicated, sometimes difficult woman I'd raised had been replaced by a calculating criminal who saw me only as an obstacle to easy money. The confrontation had revealed the complete breakdown of our relationship. There would be no reconciliation, no family healing, no possibility that Jennifer would acknowledge her crimes and seek redemption. She was going to fight until the end, using every weapon at her disposal to avoid consequences for her actions. That evening, Thomas Blackwood called to discuss the implications of Jennifer's recorded admissions. This conversation significantly strengthens both the criminal and civil cases, he explained. Jennifer essentially confessed to every major element of the fraud, while demonstrating her lack of remorse or willingness to make restitution. The next phase of the legal proceedings would be more aggressive, with Jennifer's own words providing the evidence needed for serious criminal charges. Ada Martinez was particularly interested in Jennifer's admission that she felt entitled to my money as compensation for her supposed sacrifices. Entitlement is often the underlying psychology in these elder abuse cases, Thomas explained. Adult children convince themselves they deserve their parents' assets, then create justifications for taking them. Jennifer's recording reveals that mindset perfectly. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the daughter I'd lost and the criminal I'd discovered. The woman who'd screamed at me on the phone bore little resemblance to the child I'd raised with such love and hope. Jennifer had become someone I didn't recognize, someone I couldn't save, someone I had to protect myself from. The family confrontation was over, and it had ended exactly as I'd expected, with Jennifer revealing herself as an unrepentant thief who blamed everyone but herself for her crimes. Now there was nothing left but justice, and I intended to pursue it with the same determination I'd once devoted to building the fortune Jennifer had tried to steal. My daughter had declared war on me months ago. She'd just discovered that her mother was better at warfare than she'd ever imagined. The Portland Herald ran the story on their front page. Local woman exposes daughter's $1 million elder abuse scheme. Reporter Jessica Walsh had contacted me after learning about the court proceedings, and I decided that public exposure was necessary to warn other families about the sophisticated nature of modern elder abuse. When someone you trust tells you that you're losing your mind, I told Jessica during our interview, you start to believe them, especially when they provide medical evidence and recruit other family members to support their claims. Jennifer didn't just steal money, she stole my identity, my autonomy, and nearly my sanity. The article detailed every aspect of Jennifer's fraud: the forged medical documents, the bank impersonations, the manufactured symptoms of dementia, and the systematic theft of over $1 million. Jessica had done her research, interviewing Dr. Morrison about the psychological manipulation involved, and speaking with Thomas Blackwood about the legal implications. This case represents a new level of sophistication in elder financial abuse. Dr. Morrison was quoted as saying, "The perpetrator didn't just exploit her mother's trust, she created an entire false medical history to justify her actions. It's criminal fraud disguised as family caregiving." The community response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone rang constantly, with calls from neighbors, former business associates, and complete strangers expressing support and sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. The mailbox, filled with letters from elderly people who'd experienced similar manipulation from their own children. "Margaret, I can't believe what Jennifer did to you," said Mary Chen, my neighbor for over 20 years. "We all thought she was such a devoted daughter, taking such good care of you during your difficult time. None of us suspected you were being abused. That was exactly the point." Jennifer's scheme had been so sophisticated that she'd fooled not just medical professionals and family members, but an entire community of people who'd known me for decades. Her performance as the concerned caregiver had been flawless, which made the betrayal even more devastating. The newspaper coverage triggered a flood of calls to Adult Protective Services from people reporting suspicious situations involving elderly family members. Ada Martinez told Thomas that our case had become a training example for prosecutors learning to recognize sophisticated elder abuse schemes. "Your willingness to speak publicly about this fraud is helping other victims," she said. "Many elderly people are too ashamed or confused to report financial abuse by family members. Your story is showing them that fighting back is possible." The exposure also brought unwanted attention to Jennifer and her accomplices. Marcus was arrested at his apartment after neighbors recognized him from the newspaper photo and called police. Dr. Peterson's medical practice faced scrutiny from state licensing boards for his failure to conduct independent verification of my supposed cognitive decline. But the most significant development was the response from my extended family. Relatives who believed Jennifer's stories about my declining condition now understood they'd been manipulated into participating in my abuse. My cousin Ellen called me in tears. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. When Jennifer told us about your dementia, we thought we were being supportive by going along with her version of events. I had no idea she was stealing from you." The guilt and anger expressed by family members revealed how thoroughly Jennifer had deceived everyone. She'd turned my own relatives into unwitting accomplices by convincing them they were helping a confused elderly woman rather than enabling her financial exploitation. David struggled the most with the public exposure of his sister's crimes. He called me after the article was published, his voice heavy with shame and confusion. "Mom, I keep thinking about all the times Jennifer told me you were having episodes, and I just accepted her word without questioning it. How could I have been so blind? She's very good at manipulation, David," I told him. "Jennifer spent months creating a convincing narrative about my decline, complete with medical documentation and witness testimony. You weren't blind, you were deceived by someone who'd perfected the art of deception." But David's children, my grandchildren, were having a harder time processing their aunt's betrayal. Emma called me crying after reading the newspaper article online. "Grandma, I thought you were sick. Aunt Jennifer told us we needed to be patient with you because you were confused and forgetting things. I feel so stupid for believing her." "You're not stupid, sweetheart. You were manipulated by an adult who abused your trust and love. Jennifer used your concern for me as a weapon against me." The public exposure served multiple purposes. Beyond warning other potential victims, it established a clear record of Jennifer's crimes for the criminal proceedings. It demonstrated community support for my decision to prosecute, and it destroyed any remaining credibility Jennifer might have had for claiming she'd been acting in my best interests. Jessica Walsh's follow-up articles tracked the legal proceedings as they developed. When Jennifer was formally charged with multiple felonies, the Herald covered her arraignment. When Marcus was arrested for his role in the conspiracy that made the news as well, The scope of this fraud is remarkable, Jessica wrote in her second article. Jennifer Sullivan didn't commit a crime of opportunity. She executed a carefully planned scheme that took months to develop and required the cooperation of multiple accomplices. The coverage also attracted attention from other news outlets. Television stations picked up the story, and I was interviewed for a segment about elder abuse awareness. The interview was difficult, but necessary. I wanted other elderly people to understand the warning signs of family financial exploitation. Trust but verify, I told the television audience. When family members suddenly become very interested in your finances or your medical care, ask questions, get independent opinions. Don't let anyone isolate you from outside perspectives. The publicity created pressure for swift legal resolution. Jennifer's attorney approached Thomas about a possible plea agreement, but the offer was insulting restitution of only a fraction of the stolen money in exchange for reduced charges. She wants to plead down to misdemeanor theft and make partial restitution, Thomas told me. She's still trying to minimize her responsibility and avoid serious consequences. No deal. I replied immediately. Jennifer committed multiple felonies over several months. She recruited accomplices, forged medical documents, and destroyed family relationships. She needs to face the full consequences of her choices. The truth had been exposed, but Jennifer was still fighting to avoid accountability. The public knew what she'd done. The family understood how they'd been manipulated, and the legal system was building an airtight case for prosecution. Yet she continued to maintain that she'd been protecting rather than exploiting me. The newspaper coverage had accomplished something Jennifer's manipulation couldn't. It had given me back my voice, my reputation, and my community's respect. For months, I'd been portrayed as a confused elderly woman who needed protection from herself. Now I was recognized as a competent victim of sophisticated fraud who'd fought back successfully against her abuser. Mrs. Sullivan, Jessica Walsh said during our final interview, what would you say to other elderly people who might be experiencing similar abuse? I'd tell them that their instincts are probably right, I replied. If something feels wrong about how family members are treating you or managing your affairs, trust that feeling. Get help, ask questions, and don't let anyone convince you that seeking outside assistance is disloyal to your family. The truth was out, but the fight for justice was just beginning. Jennifer had stolen more than money. She'd stolen months of my life, damaged my relationships, and nearly destroyed my sense of self. The legal system would handle her crimes, but the personal recovery would take much longer. Still, seeing her fraud exposed in black and white for the entire community to read felt like a victory. The confused, declining Margaret Sullivan that Jennifer had created was finally dead. The real Margaret Sullivan, sharp, determined, and absolutely finished being anyone's victim, was back and ready to see justice served. The wheels of justice moved faster than anyone expected once the evidence was compiled, and Jennifer's recorded confession was entered into the record. ADA Sarah Martinez had built her reputation on complex white-collar crime prosecutions, and she approached Jennifer's case with the thoroughness it deserved. Mrs. Sullivan, she explained during one of our preparation meetings, your daughter's crimes fall into multiple categories of felony fraud. We're prosecuting her for identity theft, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Each charge carries significant prison time. The grand jury indictment came down on a cold December morning. Jennifer Sullivan was formally charged with 12 felony counts related to her systematic theft of my assets. Marcus faced 8 felony charges for his role as an accomplice. Even Dr. Peterson was charged with professional negligence for his failure to conduct proper due diligence before diagnosing me with dementia. Jennifer's arraignment was a media circus. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras as she arrived with her attorney, trying to hide her face behind a folder. The confident, manipulative woman who'd spent months gaslighting me into believing I was losing my mind looked small and frightened, facing real consequences for her actions. How do you plead to the charges of identity theft and financial exploitation? Judge Harrison asked. Not guilty, Your Honor, Jennifer's attorney responded, though his voice lacked conviction. The evidence against his client was overwhelming, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The civil proceedings moved in parallel with the criminal case. Thomas Blackwood had filed asset recovery motions to trace every dollar Jennifer had stolen and identify where the money had gone. His forensic accountants discovered a complex web of accounts, investments, and cash transactions designed to hide the stolen funds. She was more sophisticated than we initially realized, Thomas explained, showing me charts that track the movement of my money. Jennifer didn't just spend your assets, she tried to launder them through multiple accounts to make recovery difficult. Some of the money had gone to pay Jennifer's gambling debts, but surprisingly large amounts had been invested in stocks and real estate under false names. Jennifer had apparently planned to eventually claim these assets as her legitimate inheritance, creating a paper trail that would support her story about protecting my money. She was playing a long game, Patricia Holmes observed. Jennifer wasn't just stealing for immediate relief of her financial problems. She was building a foundation for long-term wealth that she could claim after your death. The realization that Jennifer had been planning for my death as part of her financial strategy was particularly chilling. She hadn't just seen me as a source of money, she'd seen me as an obstacle to her inheritance that needed to be managed until it could be eliminated. The court-ordered asset freeze had stopped Jennifer from accessing any remaining funds, but it also revealed the scope of her theft. Over $1.3 million had been stolen from my accounts, with another $400,000 in property that had been sold without my knowledge or consent. Judge Reeves, who was handling the civil case, was unimpressed by Jennifer's attempts to justify her actions. Miss Sullivan, your mother is sitting in this courtroom, demonstrating perfect mental competency. The medical evidence shows no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. How do you explain the discrepancy between your claims and reality? Jennifer's civil attorney had no good answer. The foundation of her defense, that she'd been protecting an incompetent parent, had been thoroughly demolished by Dr. Morrison's evaluation and my own testimony. The criminal case gained momentum when Marcus decided to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed details about Jennifer's planning that even our investigation hadn't uncovered. She had notebooks full of research about elder abuse laws, power of attorney procedures, and medical guardianship requirements. Marcus told the grand jury. Jennifer spent months studying how to legally steal from her mother. This wasn't impulse, it was premeditated fraud. Marcus also testified about Jennifer's recruitment of accomplices, her practice sessions for impersonating me at the bank, and her plans to eventually have me committed to a nursing home where she could complete the theft without interference. Jennifer talked about it like a business plan, Marcus said. She calculated how much money she could steal before anyone got suspicious, how to create paper trails that looked legitimate, and how to manipulate family members into supporting her story. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Peterson himself. Under oath, he admitted that he diagnosed me with dementia based primarily on Jennifer's reports, rather than his own clinical observations. I relied too heavily on family testimony. He acknowledged Jennifer presented herself as a concerned daughter providing accurate information about her mother's condition. I should have conducted more independent verification before making such a serious diagnosis. Dr. Peterson's admission opened him to both criminal charges and civil liability. His medical license was suspended pending investigation by the state medical board, and several of his other elderly patients requested independent evaluations of their own diagnoses. As the evidence mounted, Jennifer's attorney began pushing harder for a plea agreement. The prosecution's case was ironclad, and Jennifer was facing the possibility of 20 years in prison if convicted on all charges. She's willing to plead guilty to reduced charges and make full restitution. Her attorney told Ada Martinez, "My client recognizes that her actions were wrong and wants to make amends, but Martinez wasn't interested in reducing charges. Your client committed sophisticated fraud against her own mother over a period of months. She forged medical documents, recruited criminal accomplices, and stole over $1 million. The state doesn't negotiate with criminals who prey on elderly victims." Thomas Blackwood was equally firm about the civil case. "We want full restitution, punitive damages for the emotional distress Jennifer caused, and compensation for the legal fees required to recover the stolen assets. Jennifer created this mess. She can pay to clean it up." The pressure was building from multiple directions. Jennifer faced serious prison time in the criminal case, financial ruin in the civil proceedings, and complete social ostracism in the community where she'd lived her entire life. Her perfect crime had become a perfect disaster. But what satisfied me most wasn't the legal consequences Jennifer was facing. It was the restoration of my reputation and relationships. Family members who'd believed Jennifer's lies about my mental decline now understood how thoroughly they'd been manipulated. Carol, my sister-in-law, who'd been so eager to corroborate Jennifer's stories about my confusion, called to apologize with genuine remorse. "Margaret, I owe you a huge apology. I was so ready to believe the worst about you that I never questioned Jennifer's version of events. I'm ashamed of how I treated you." Even my grandchildren were beginning to understand the scope of their aunt's betrayal. Emma, now 18 and heading to college, wrote me a letter expressing her anger at being manipulated into treating me like an invalid. "Grandma, I'm so sorry for how I acted at family gatherings. Aunt Jennifer convinced us you were sick and needed special treatment. I feel awful about believing her lies instead of trusting my own observations. The justice system was working exactly as it should. Criminals were being prosecuted, stolen assets were being recovered, and victims were being vindicated. Jennifer's elaborate scheme had unraveled completely, leaving her facing consequences she'd never imagined when she started down the path of theft and deception.